topic for today, as we're getting closer and closer to the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that one of the core themes is this idea of teshuvah, and I want to specifically talk about interpersonal teshuvah. So you may have heard that Kol Nidre says, you can't expect forgiveness from God until you've gotten forgiveness from other people, and that this is especially a time where people reconcile with each other through teshuvah, which means something like apologizing and forgiving. Well, that's easy to say, extremely difficult to do. So one thing I want to do is just slow down and think about. First of all, I think I wrote in my Shabbat summary, although it was a long time ago, it was already a day and a half ago. It's really hard for people to apologize. I've seen it in relationships, and one thing I've noticed when I do inter couples counseling is when one person says, "Hey, I need an apology," the other person says, "Well, what about you?" I call it a case of the whatabouts. So it's very hard for a person to say, you know what? I will own my stuff. I'll be accountable for myself. I'm not going to worry about you. That's your struggle with your inner life, your conscience, your God. I'm going to be accountable for myself. That is really a sign of a true chassid, a person truly devoted to divine practice. And oftentimes a person can't apologize because the person who asks for the apology doesn't do it in a nice way. They're angry, they're accusatory. They're all breaking what I call the third of the four C's, which is harsh language, accusing, blaming, labeling, shaming, guilting. And people don't respond well to that. So the Talmud tells us, great is the generation that can accept rebuke, and greater is the generation that can rebuke. Now, I've been told for many years the word rebuke is way too harsh of a word. Okay, I'll call it bringing someone to account, meaning asking that someone be accountable. And here's why it is so complex. I'm going to say lema'aseh, not as an idea, an ideal, but why? As a individual couples and family counselor, what I've run into is um, number one, people have such distinctly different memories of what happens. So when a person says, I need an apology for incident A, person B can say, that never happened, or you're remembering it very poorly. Now, what I've seen in front of me by beginners is, get ready, you're lying. Of course, you remember it exactly as I remember it, because my memory is the gold standard. So I know you remember, you're just not owning up. And I've seen a person say, no, I really don't remember. Oh, there you are, avoiding the truth again. I say, okay, everybody, calm down, calm down, calm down. Got to do a little bit of wisdom work here. First of all, no four C's, no criticizing, complaining, harsh language. All right. And so what I said to people when they say they want to work something through, oftentimes I say something to people that after 10 minutes of warm up, I give them the strong version, which is, you're not qualified to reconcile. Many people who try to reconcile with another person are not qualified to do it. Why? They actually don't know the laborious process, the incremental steps of reconciling with another human being. So let's say that this month of Elul and the high holidays really is a time to look inside, to introspect, and see whether there's been any estrangement in your life. We'll talk about in the past in a little bit, but let's say now, and you say to yourself, I need an apology or I owe an apology. I need an apology or I owe an apology. So first of all is, don't say anything to anybody yet. Just because you would like an apology doesn't mean you deserve an apology. And just because you feel you need to apologize, it might be propelled by guilt or shame or some other inner life distortion. Um, so I've known people. I have to share with you. Many years ago, a synagogue member called me very abjectly and said, "I really want to apologize for how I was on the phone to you yesterday." I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I said, "We're fine." I said, "No, Rabbi Finley, you really can talk to me directly because I trust you, and I just want to tell you, I was really off." I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. You can remind me if you want. I'll get hurt all over again, but I don't remember being hurt at all." So the person said, I just thought we had a little mild disagreement. I didn't feel hurt." And they said, "Really?" I said, "Really?" He goes, "Okay." So So I apologize that you don't need to apologize. We're good. So now, why I think as we reflected on it later, he said, person said to me, I value our relationship so much that I don't want to inadvertently bring damage to this really nice relationship we had. And I thought that you would resent me. And I said, first of all, when people talk, sometimes people throw a barb and throw an elbow, and that's okay. That's just part of what people talk. We have to take it with good humor. I said, but I don't you think you any threw any elbows or threw any barbs, so we're good. So, but what I translated it as, and we actually said it explicitly, how much he values me and how much I value him. And while there is a little bit of tussle and good humor and teasing in the relationship, we're very careful to stay in our lane. So I want to say to you, if you feel guilty, if you feel ashamed for something that you've done, it's really well to introspect where the feelings are coming from. So I can remember times in my life where I've really felt terrible and I felt I owed a person an apology, and I got myself all worked up and I said, wait a minute, follow the plan, which is first of all, kind of a moment of your time. Sure. Do you remember that thing, a while back when X happened? Yeah, kind of. I said, do we need to work something through there? They go, not at all. We're done. Now, the person might be very gracious and say, we don't need to spend time on it because our relationship is so strong. Let's not deal with something that we don't have to deal with. Meaning, our relationship automatically metabolizes tough moments. And this is one thing, a mistake I believe that mostly young couples make, but some people throughout their lives is they litigate everything. Everything has to be talked about. Every hurt, every slight, every wrong word, every cross look has to be talked about as if we can somehow live with pure spiritual consciousness with another person, which I think is impossible if you have a real relationship where people are really present as a human being. And when you are really present as a human being, you got to watch yourself, but you don't want to be held an expectation of being impeccable. Now, I know in 12-step programs, people say I need to be impeccable with my word. I say it doesn't matter how impeccable you want to be, someone's going to peck, right? Okay, so someone pecked at you. Okay, so maybe you're not impeccable. You're peckable. All right, we don't have to catastrophize about that. Um, Mirav and I have a little saying that we each get alarmed when the other says it, which is 95% of what I want to say to you, I don't say. I thought, wow, that's a lot. Right? We don't need to talk about it. So I said, well, 95% of what I want to say to you, I don't say. She says, that sounded like a little bit of what about? So I said, okay, you busted me, maybe 82%. But anyway, I think that's a really good practice. 95% of what I want to say, I don't say, right? Again, I'm speaking for all of us because I metabolize it. Because the relationship is so strong, we don't need to litigate everything. So during this time of teshuvah, bringing things up, and this is really more of an art than a craft, bringing things up that the relationship naturally metabolizes by, number one, symbolic gestures. When people are upset with each other, instead of talking the whole thing through, and again, I'm a bit suspicious of talking things through unless you're really skilled, and not everything has to be talked through. Many things are healed between people through symbolic gestures. So if there's a tough moment, instead of talking the whole thing through, sometimes just a gift, an offer to do something, a word of praise, some act of service, and where it's a symbolic apology, it's a symbolic compensation. It doesn't have to be spoken about. The other person knows what's going on. It's as if people are having a conversation through symbolic language, so they don't have to go into a verbal conversation, which can go so poorly. Because an act of kindness is pretty direct. When you start to try to talk about a hurt, which can oftentimes turn into blame or accusation, then there's another layer of things that has to be talked about. So while I believe in processing with people, I also believe in strong relationships. Not everything has to be processed. Not every hurt has to be articulated. Not every forgiveness has to be articulated as such, Um, I remember a long time ago when a person was talking to someone, the person said, "I forgive you." Here's the problem with "I forgive you." Uh, when it's really something awful, yeah, you got to say "I forgive you" to get back on track. But forgiving implies judging. Okay? So therefore, saying "I forgive you" implies you've judged the person and you're offering clemency. I'll share with you an anecdote I think I share every time this year. We were at the Wilshire Bell Theater, and a person came to me and said, "Rabbi Finley, I've been holding a hardness of heart toward you for many years. And I want you to know today I forgave you." I said, "I want my day in court." I said, "I don't want you to forgive me. What if I didn't do anything?" They said, "Oh, no, you." I said, "Like, I really want my day in court. I want you to rebuke me with kindness, and I want you to allow me to respond." Right? Because here's what I know. Because of the dramatic nature of our feeling emotional life, we build cases in the drama of the unconscious ego self. We actually make things up. We misinterpreted people. So if I say to myself, well, I've judged them and I forgive them, maybe I'm a fool. Maybe I made it all up. Maybe it's part of my dramatic narrative about the world, and it really is not connected to very much reality. And that's another reason why I just want to caution people when to say to somebody, uh, I forgive you for that thing. And they say, well, you know, you don't need to forgive me. I need to forgive you. Okay, that's going to be a day of processing. So before we say things like this, it's a lot of introspection. And here's one thing that you can assume as we go into these Yamim Noraim, assume that your unconscious ego self's feelings, strong feelings, are not reliable. Just assume that. You can write that down. You can memorize that. When you have negative feelings in the unconscious ego self, resentment, anger, victimhood, harm, etc., rely on what I think is a human condition fact. A lot of it is not connected to reality. So for me, entering into the Yamim Noraim, a very big part of it is healthy self-skepticism. My story is my story, but it might not be connected to reality. Now, by nature, we human beings have a reality that we live in and walk around. And by nature, some of that reality judges other people as we try to organize reality. This person is good, this person is bad, this person hurt me, this is a friend, that's a fiend. That's just what we do. But if you really want to grow as a conscious human being, we have to pull that narrative in. And this was my the third of my several steps of Shabbat toward Rosh Hashanah was the Shabbat of truth, what it means to be a person of truth, which is don't fall for the clever traps of the unconscious ego self of the Yetzer Hara. It's always plotting, it's always forming, always delivering up a story. And again, it can be a story of guilt or it can be a story of hurt, right? Depending on the person, depending on the situation, the unconscious ego self knows your weak point. If you're guilt driven, it will tell you you're guilty, you're bad, you did something wrong, want to be miserable. And in a given situation, I don't think we're only one way or the other. And if you tend to be a person who's hurt and resentful, it'll deliver up the story that you need. Another way of saying it is the Yetzer Hara will deliver up stories based on the emotion that you unconsciously want to have. Right? I just want you to think about that for a moment. Something happens, something says resent, and the Yetzer Hara says, "Oh, I can write a story on resentment. You need a story on resentment? I'll give you a really good one." Right? Just don't check it out. Just don't examine the story. Right? Or if you say, "I did really something bad," the Yetzer Hara says, "Oh, you need a guilt story? I got it all ready for you." Just don't be too introspective about it and don't doubt the story, because that's what the Yetzer Hara wants you to do. It wants to do deliver up narratives, deliver up stories, and not have you examine them. So even with the idea of apologizing, which sounds so good, I've heard people uh, apologize and really open a wound. So just a little bit on that detailed process. And I've talked about this before, and it's worth repeating. The first thing you talk about, whether you want to offer an apology or receive an apology, is get the chronology straight. I call this sometimes the police report, the bare bones bullet point account. Now, in my wisdom works curriculum, this is a rationality practice. And why a rationality practice is when you devote yourself to getting the bullet point account of what happened, you're moving for what I'm going to at least metaphorically call um, right brain drama narrative, which is, sometimes where hurts are stored, over to left brain rational clarity. So as propelling me is the hurt narrative. But my higher self doesn't trust the hurt narrative and says something like this. We're taking the hurt narrative from the right brain drama of hurt. We're moving it over to the left brain to rational analysis. Now, who's doing that? That's the mystery of consciousness. But something in us gets trained, some part of the higher self, but I'll call this the truth mind. I know I feel it. It might be connected to reality. I know I think it. It might not be true. So just being able to say that to yourself. So oftentimes when I think I need an apology, that's a story my Yetzer Hara made up. So don't ever walk to somebody and say, Rabbi Finley's advice, don't say, I need an apology from you. Start with, can we talk about that thing? It happened, whatever, Tuesday night. Where were we? Or the movie theater, standing in line. Forget movie theaters now. We were looking for a movie on Netflix, something, whatever the modern equivalent. You can see how old this teaching is. And I said, yeah, I remember that. And say, okay, do you remember that we talked a bit? I said, yeah, yeah. Did you have any feelings afterwards? No, seemed to go pretty straight. Okay, so I'd like to bring something up. Now, this is key. What I'm going to share with you is a memory. It might not be accurate. It might not be true. The fact that it's in my memory doesn't mean it happened. It just means it's fueled by feelings. And I know enough to know that sometimes my memories, it takes a little grain of reality and it fabricates an entire world around it. Now, you don't have to say it that extensively, but I've counseled couples that are really in trouble from years of toxic languaging. I really try to give them a script. I'd like to bring something up. It's something I remember. It doesn't mean it happened, but I want to bring it up to you because, first of all, maybe you can help me with my memory. Now, the other person is thinking, that's quite honorable. That's quite noble. Meaning you're not starting with j'accuse. You're not starting with I accuse, I blame, I label. You're starting with I'm fallible. When you start with I'm fallible, the other person's defensiveness goes way down. Realizes we're going to have an authentic, real, true conversation between two people who want to reconcile. Not one person wants to accuse and hold the person to account until the evidence has been presented. So in this apology, in the what this is called holding to someone to account. In biblical language, rebuking. I'll call it holding someone to account. Do a lot of introspection first. Know that your memory is fallible. That memories are oftentimes feeling generated. Something did happen. Maybe your memory is right. But when you come to another person, don't assume they remember it like you. Now we're into the next part of why this is so hard. You actually might have a pretty clear memory. Let's say when it happened, you went and you wrote it down. So I'm going to bring this up in 2 days, not right now, which is always smart. Don't bring it up when it's happening. And you rehearse it. And I remember this happened. And go to the other person and they say, no, it didn't happen that way. So I wrote it down right when it happened. That doesn't matter. That never happened. All right. So now you're at the problem with you want to hold someone to account. They actually have no memory of it, or they have, from your perspective, and you might be right, a distorted memory. Okay? Now that's when beginner people, who are fueled by, hot emotions, say something like, well, your memory's no good, or you're lying and you always avoid. I say, don't do that. You might win that day because you're so forceful and so hurt. It doesn't speak to a thriving ongoing relationship. So a thriving ongoing relationship would go like this and say, we talk about that thing. The fact that you wrote it down afterwards, that's a pretty good habit. They say, sure. Say, I could be wrong. Here's how I remember it. They say, I don't remember it that way. Okay. Now here's where the art comes in. You say, would you like to try to remember it? It's important to me. Now, if a person has been constantly under another person's scrutiny, They may not want to remember it because what they feel you're always hurt, you're angry, you're always upset. I just don't want to do this anymore. I mean, there are relationships that are built like that. There's always the constantly hurt one, the constantly apologizing one, and people get tired of it. Which is why I say, as my wife and I say, 95% you don't say. So when you really do need to something to work out, it's not something that takes up all the time in the relationship. It's relatively an exception to what relationships need, which is metabolizing of hurts because the relationship is strong and as a way to keep relationships strong. So let's say I have a hurt, I want to bring it up, and I got my facts straight. And person says, I don't remember that. I say, and I have said, would you like to remember it? And if everybody's in the right place, says, sure. I mean, if I wronged you, I really would like to know. So how do you work with if you are pretty sure that your memory is good? How do you work with the fallible memory of another person? This is one of the most constant and crucial questions I am asked in counseling. What happens when our memories don't line up? You ever had this happen to you? You want to work something out, the memories don't line up. So there's actually a skill, an incremental skill over time of helping memories line up. So by incremental, I mean, if you just want to start the practice of memories lining up, it's going to take 6 months until memories start to line up. So you don't start it and think it's going to happen that day. You start it because you're investing in 6 months later. So here's what you want to do. A few things like this. Were there words after the incident that could only be derived from that incident? Words, deeds, feelings, etc. That could only come from that incident. Person says, I don't remember that. Well, do you remember, that sometime Sunday afternoon, I was acting really hurt? Do you remember that? Yeah, now that you mentioned it, yeah, you were hurt. Do you remember why I was hurt? Yeah, you're always hurt. Yeah, aside from that, you get a pass on that one because we're working on something. No, do you remember that we had a little something? You got a little upset and I walked away here. Do you remember that at all? They go, now that you mention it, I do. You have any idea what happened? No, but I remember that happening. Well, that's a win. Walk away. Walk away. That's a win. Because now you've done a successful job of alerting a person to the fact that things happen that they don't remember or block that are significant for, let's say, person A. Remember, because we're in a 6-month program to line memories up. So when you walk away, the other, and by the way, this has happened at least truly hundreds of times in counseling. I will prepare person A. I'm training them how to get memories lined up. I said it's a 6-month program. Step one is just let them be aware that their memories are fallible. That's it. That's enough for this week. And when they say, well, you're right, something did happen, I just don't remember it. You say, well, that's actually enough for now. Thank you. Why is that so important? Because the other person didn't get shamed. The other person didn't get judged. The other person wasn't, dragged into court. And the other person says graciously, that's enough. We're good. Hug and a kiss. Let's move on with the day. So what you're doing is something that is extremely important for reconciliation in relationships, repairing relationships, which is trust that things are going to end well in a conversation. No one's going to get bruised. No one's eyebrows are going to get singed. We go in, we work something out. We exit with, you guessed it, I'm okay, you're okay. You start with, I'm a little bit not okay. I think you're a little bit not okay. And you end with, I'm okay, you're okay. So the goal of the conversation is not to win. The goal of the conversation is to strengthen the relationship. It's really difficult when a person's hurt because when you're hurt, you want compensation. You're thinking about, I want an apology. What you really want is a good relationship. So when people say to me, and again, it's classic, it's archetypal because I hear it every single time, but Rabbi Finley, I really do remember. My memory is pretty infallible. I say, well, just say you don't remember, but that's not true. Are you asking me to lie? So, well, there's different kinds of truth. There's correspondence truth, meaning the statement, my memory is fallible, does not accord with the reality, the supposed reality. My memory is infallible. So let's assume I don't think it's true, but let's assume it's true. There's something called your memory. It is infallible. And Rabbi Finley is guiding you to say, when you want to work something through, say something, knowing that my memory is fallible. And people start by saying, I'm not going to say something untrue because I believe in correspondence truth. Statements should match reality. Okay? There's actually a whole philosophic movement called logical positivism that tried to solve all philosophic problems with the idea that statements have to accord to empirical reality. They spent a bunch of years on it. It collapsed because no one really cares that the chair is a chair. What they care about is, do you love me? Right? Do you respect? Do you value me? Right? Are you going to stay with me? What kind of person am I? Right. So logical positives. So, well, that's just psychology. That's actually not just psychology. It is psychology. You want to, I studied this for a few months when I was in college. It's called the Viennese Circle. You read it, and I already knew enough to know this is going to go nowhere. No one cares. No one cares. So I'm one of those people who believe philosophy is only meaningful if it helps everyday people with everyday problems. If it doesn't help everyday people with everyday problems, it's not worth studying, unless you're a professional philosopher and you need to publish a paper. From my perspective, philosophy is only important if it helps everyday people work through everyday problems with themselves, with other people, society, etc. By the way, that's been my approach in our three-session class on the four dialogues of Plato. I'd say to myself, I'm not teaching the dialogues. I'm teaching how we can use parts of the dialogues for our own personal growth and how to understand and conduct our lives. I hope I succeeded. So I wrote an email to the class that, is that what I did? That's what I wanted to do. Right. So what's the higher truth? The higher truth is not correspondence truth. Statements accord with reality. The higher truth is the human truth of wanting to cultivate flourishing relationships. So I could spend all day saying sentences that accord with reality and have a wretched relationship, or I could actually fudge what I think the truth is a little bit in service of a flourishing relationship. So I would say to people, what truth level do you want to be at? That proposition should accord with reality. That's a non-starter in personal relationships. Because in personal relationships, there's a lot of sacrifice of ego. There's a lot of sacrifice of what you think is right. So just the whole idea of, I don't think my memory's fallible. I'm just going to say it because it's probably true. And second, it lowers the other person's defensiveness and puts us on an equal footing as we try to work something through. It lowers the other person's defensiveness. It creates kind of a bond. Two people with fallible memories who are trying to work something through. As I sometimes say, two people trying to, help each other through this all too short, sometimes scabrous road we call life, and help each other as through as possible until one of us moves first to the next world. When you think of it that way, what does it matter that you have an empirical truth that and that's where you're really gonna, you plant your flag? That's where you're gonna plant your flag? That's actually foolish. There's something much grander called a life truth. Okay, so that's one side of this apology side of things. Really think about what you're after. An enduring, flourishing relationship, or calling someone to an account on something that should probably metabolized by a healthy relationship. And if you do want to get to the point of better memories, do one thing at a time. I gave you one skill today, and as I think about all the teaching I'm going to do on the high holidays, I might actually do a full hour session on the several steps to help people, 6-month program to help people's memories line up better so they can process things. Okay, now the basic takeaway from this is, when you want to hold another person to account, you have to root yourself in, first of all, humility, your own fallibility, um, with love. You got to remember for a moment, as upset as you are, you love this person. And if you can't find the love, don't talk. Reverence for the relationship, reverence for truth, gratitude. There are so many fundamental spiritual values that I'm not saying we can be here all the time. I'm not, namby-pamby new ager, always living gratitude. I'm not always living in gratitude, right? But I do remember when there's something at stake, and I'm going to be like the political situation in Israel. Forget the war, the political situation. And I get really mad at people who, want to destroy the economy and, shut down the economy and shut down the airport and stand in front of the road and stop trains. I just think it's incivil. that you think you're so right, you want to shut down the economy and stop people fulfilling their basic right to go about their way and get where they want to go. I get really upset inside. I got to take a breath. Okay. They think, I think incorrectly, but they think there's something so important at stake that they have to bring the country to consciousness. And the only way they can do that is stop traffic. Right? It's okay. Let me work with that. Let me just assume the best intentions, not assume the worst of intentions. Okay? And what do I do now? Okay, so I realize I'm gonna try to find some love. I'm gonna try to find some understanding. I want to have a mature view of things. And then if I ever get the chance to talk to someone who goes to demonstrations, shut down roads and shut down the trains, I can come from a place of love. Say, like, I want to ask you a couple of questions. And it's from real respect. I mean, you believe something, I don't happen to believe it, but you're acting on your beliefs. But if you don't mind, can we have a respectful conversation? We just had one of those pardon me, one of those conversations last night at our Shabbat table. There was someone who's pretty much thought very different from me. But what I note is a young person, a young man about 22, very well thought out. And, so here's this older guy, and I wanted him to feel completely safe and we got to a point where we moved, where because we were both careful, we moved to the center on a conversation that here in Israel usually explodes because two people were careful with each other, didn't need to be right. More important than this working this thing out, this person that I just met, one of Abigail's friends, I think to myself, I think I'd like to know this person. I think I'd like to have an ongoing relationship with this person. So the first night that we meet, I don't want to have a battle. I don't want anybody to come away hurt. Right? So I thought to myself, we're going to have a respectful conversation, investing in what I hoped would be a long-term relationship. And at the very end, I said, I really hope I see you again. He says, me too. This was great. Really appreciate it. So we could have ended upset or we could end it with a bond. Now just take that one little moment of a new acquaintance and put that into a lifelong relationship. So I'm really advocating this for you. Today I've only talked about the person who feels hurt and wants an apology. I'll talk about the other person next week. I hope I remember. I really want us to take this wisdom. When you're feeling hurt and you want to hold someone to account, root yourself in affect before you apply the skill. Now, I'm a very skill-based teacher, as you all know, in my processing class, one skill after another. But I've been reflecting all summer on my Wisdom Works curriculum, and I'm realizing there's a lot of errors that I have to fix. And one of them is I've said it, but I haven't emphasized it. Before you want to process with another person, root yourself very deeply in affect, in emotions and feelings. And from a value system, we don't say all affects are natural. Some affects are better than others for flourishing relationships. Affects are natural. They come up on their own. We don't will them forward. They come out of the unconscious ego so they can take over consciousness. So every affect is natural, right? But not every affect is good for ongoing relationships. I don't believe in repressing affect. If I feel angry, hurt, upset, wronged, I feel all my feelings. I don't talk about it. This is not repressing. This is feel all my feelings, think about all my feelings, get it all straightened out in here, but don't go to the other person with those feelings. Root myself in affect. The only reason I want to talk about this because we love each other and we're both invested in a lifelong relationship. I was thinking about my wife and children. And I think most people I know, anybody that I don't want to know anymore, I already don't know anymore. So all of us are in that, hey, I'd like to know you for a long time. I think we're good. I think we create beauty together. It's a lot of harmony to be creative. Let's all be careful with each other. So, I think to myself, first of all, we're human beings. Life is tough. It can be lonely at times. Let's not discard relationships. Let's root ourselves in love and truth and reverence and gratitude. Really get your heart whole. You take a deep breath and breathe from that place and say, can I have a moment of your time? So really my prayer for all of us as we, get engaged in teshuvah, which is turning toward other people, turning toward our souls, toward turning toward the divine. That one skill we master is rooting ourselves in an inner life that is overflowing with goodness.